If you go into a grocery store and are trying to select healthy foods, you are fighting an entire food system on your own. I've had people in food companies tell me this over and over again. Regulate us. Give us a level playing field.
Oh,
We
interesting.
don't want to go first. Meat and dairy products are the largest source of saturated fatty acids in American diets. You're not allowed to say eat less meat because
Marion Nestle. First of all, it's a huge honor to sit with you there. And the listeners they're in for a huge treat because everybody's talking about our food environment and processed food. And you've been quietly and sometimes not so quietly studying this as an academic, as a PhD for 40 years. And
more.
okay, about a half a century. And which is giving you're a real scientist. You're rigorous, you're very smart, and you also don't back down. And I think of this adage of gentle pressure, relentlessly applied. And you've done that with the food industry. And you kind of, I would say, burst on the scene in, I think, 2002 with Food Politics, which is a book that pulled away the veil that helped us understand why we're living in a food environment where today over 50% of all of our food is processed or ultra processed, where over 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And, I like to say it's not their fault, but we'll unpack that with you. But why don't we start with where we are and when it comes to food and the ensuing health, and how did we get here?
The way I would describe it is what you just said. 75% of American adults are overweight or obese. And the food environment in which we live can be described by one's graph from the Department of Agriculture, which shows what happens to all of the corn that's produced in the United States. Roughly half of it goes to feed animals to produce meat. The other half, almost, goes to produce ethanol for automobiles.
So we don't even eat it.
We don't eat hardly any of the corn that's produced. And the remaining under 10% is used for all of the ingredients that corn goes to make, the kind of industrial uses, and a completely tiny, practically unmeasurable fraction is sweet corn. That's our food system. That's what we start with. So it's not a food system in which agriculture is aimed at producing food for people. It's set up for producing feed for animals or fuel for automobiles or airplanes, because the same thing is true for soybeans, except they go to make diesel fuel.
But at the end of the day, our grocery stores are something like 60% ultra processed foods. I mean, this all ties in too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, because the ultra processed foods are based on industrial food ingredients. That's whatever corn and soybeans go to human food, that's where they go, is to the ingredients in processed foods. Processed foods are convenient. They can sit on the shelf for a really, really, really long time. They're among the most profitable foods that are available in supermarkets, so the food companies love them. They're enormously advertised and marketed, so everybody's gotten used to it, and people think that's what they're supposed to be eating.
My dad grew up on a farm, and they had an enormous garden. They had one pig, and they had one cow, and the cow regularly gave milk, and the pig once a year. It had a couple good years and then one bad day, and it turned into pork chops. But mostly what they were eating was the food that they grew in their garden.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get from there to a world where the vast majority of the food choices were presented would be unrecognizable as food back in the days when my dad was on the farm?
Chalk it up to the Second World War, when food companies started producing meals for soldiers who were overseas and developed all this technology for producing processed foods that would last and taste reasonably well when, if consumed by people in the field
Who were really hungry
who were really hungry and needed the food. And after the war, they needed to find something to do with that technology. And the transportation system had enormously improved during the war. That was when all the highways were built. You could get food from California to the East Coast, so that changed the fruit and vegetable mix. But the packaged food stuff came about because there was the technology just waiting to be used. And there was an enormous effort from the fruit industry to sell the products that they were making. So they did that by pushing homemakers to think that cooking was a huge chore. You don't want to have to do all that chore. We can produce TV dinners. That was one of the first that got introduced.
Spam, I remember.
Spam. Well, that was during the war. That was a wartime product. And the TV dinners and the packaged foods, we can do this. It'll be cheap. You won't have to do the work. And an enormous effort. I mean, there are terrific books that have been written about this. Laura Shapiro's Perfection Salad is a historical account of exactly how this happened. And so people got used to eating processed foods, and they're the most marketed. And unfortunately, as people started eating more and more of them, and they got defined as ultra processed, the really bad ones, then people could do research. And that research shows that diets that are high in ultra processed foods increase the risk for obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. I mean, everything that ails you. And those are observational studies and they're correlation, not causation. But by now, there are very, very well controlled clinical trials that show that these foods induce people to eat more of them than they otherwise would. They eat more calories.
Was there an inflection point? You're saying that a lot of the seeds of our processed food culture began in World War II. But was there a point where the graph started to hockey stick, and why?
1980.
1980.
1980, a very sharp demarcation. The election of Ronald Reagan, who came in with a deregulatory agenda and did several things. Deregulated food marketing so that companies could do a lot of marketing to kids.
Oh, so before that you couldn't?
Before that, there were some restrictions. Those were removed. It really promoted a much looser business environment. And then in 1981, Jack Welch, who was then head of General Electric, gave a speech in which he said Milton Friedman's theory of shareholder value is really what we should all be doing. Never mind IBM's blue chip stock, long-term return on investment. Forget about that. We want higher returns on investment now. And everybody bought it. So that was, again, right at the inflection point.
So connect the dots between the Doritos that is for sale in the grocery store right now and Jack Welch saying we got to maximize shareholder value.
Well, I need one more.
Okay.
One more piece in that. And that started in the 1970s. We had Earl Butz, who was Secretary of Agriculture, who said, grow as much food as you possibly can. The Department of Agriculture was rewarding farmers and paying farmers not to grow food in order to keep prices up so farmers would make a living.
So if they're not growing food, what are they growing?
They would just let the fields fallow.
Wow.
They just didn't harvest them. And he said, I want you to grow food fence row to fence row. We're going to feed the world. And farmers were very good at increasing production. And so the number of calories in the food supply in 1980 were 30.
We should say what were they planting? What were these farmers planting?
Oh, corn and soybeans. Corn and soybeans, commodity crops.
And wheat, I assume, or not?
Yeah, that too. We're not talking about lettuce and tomatoes.
Okay.
No, quite commodity crops. Those are specialty crops. Food for people is specialty crops.
The specialty food is what we should be eating.
Specialty food.
But
So that's food for people, and that's what the Department of Agriculture does very, very little to support. The Department of Agriculture supports commodity crops. So the number of calories in the food supply increased from 3,200 calories a day per capita, meaning men, women, little tiny babies. By the year 2000, it had gone up to 4,000 calories a day, where it remains. So this enormous influx of calories into the food supply, food companies had to figure out a way to sell those calories. And they were already having to do the shareholder value thing, which meant that they not only had to make a profit, but they had to show growth in profits every 90 days. And they were trying to do that in a situation in which there was twice as many calories in the food supply as anybody needed. The average, if you go across the population needs about 2,000 calories a day. On average, we've got 4,000. So how do you sell food in that environment? Well, you figure out ways to do it. You make bigger portions. Reason enough why people are gaining weight, because if I had one nutrition concept to get across, it would be that larger portions have more calories.
Oh, boy, really?
Really?
Newsflash?
Really, yeah. I mean, it's not intuitively obvious. It really isn't. So they made bigger portions. They put food in places where it had never been before. Bookstores.
Wow.
Libraries. When I went to NYU in the late 1980s, there were signs all over the library. You can't bring food in here. Now there's cafes. There's there's the entire first floor of the library is people drinking coffee and looking at their computer.
The most egregious example. You go to a Walgreens or a pharmacy, and to go get your diabetes medicine, you have to route through a gauntlet of chips and sodas and candies before you even get your diabetes. And then you got to do it in reverse.
And now they have special sections for people taking GLP-1 drugs.
So there's a products for GLP-1
Right.
people. Yes,
right.
So just to go back, because it's very, very interesting, this Nixon administration in the 1970s, what was the impetus for Nixon to turn to Earl Butz and say, I want you to change the agricultural system away from real food to these commodity crops? Why does our government want that?
No, because they could sell them. I mean, the idea was that you could sell all that corn and soybeans to Russia, or sell it to the Soviet Union, or sell it elsewhere, and it would make much more money for.
In all fairness, in 1970, do you think people knew that corn, soybeans, and wheat, the products were unhealthy?
Well, they're not unhealthy if consumed in reasonable amounts. They're not. I mean, the processed foods came in slowly in those years. And it wasn't really until the 1980s when they proliferated enormously, because there was so much money to be made and the ingredients were cheap.
When did it become common, or when did you know, and then when did it become common knowledge that too much processed food was bad for us? And the reason I ask, I like to think of myself as a bit of a, informed health, individual. And until 2000, I would drink half a dozen Coca-Colas a day. I had no idea. Or I eat Doritos, and I, had Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios with milk on it. I had no idea this was bad for me. Now, of course, I do. But I wonder when scientists knew, and when did the public?
Well, I would say it was called junk food in those days. And that was a term that was coined by Michael Jacobson, who was the director of Center for Science and the Public Interest.
Yes.
And
created the new museum, right?
And he was doing
right
all that stuff starting in the early 1970s. So it goes way back.
I remember very well. I ran marathons, and I was a long distance cyclist in the 80s and early 90s. And the state of the art wisdom was carbo load. You're supposed, if you want to perform, you load up on pancakes with syrup and spaghetti and wash it down with the beer. So in the defense of public, we get all these confusing messages on what we should be eating, and over time, and the state of the science changes.
It doesn't change very much if you dig. If you dig into the science, it really doesn't change very much. The carbohydrate loading is still a very good idea if you're a marathon runner. You want to have as much glycogen as you possibly can before you start running. And there was plenty of research at the time to back that up. Where the big switches came, or what seemed like switches, and I bear some responsibility for that because I was the editor of the 1988 Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health, which was the one and only Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health, which came out in 1988. And that report, for which I was lucky enough to get the credit for everything that was good about it and don't get blamed for everything that was bad about it. And one of the things that was really bad about, which I had absolutely nothing to do with it, was the major take-home message, which was that the single most important thing you can do for your dietary health is to reduce your fat intake.
What were the revelations for those of us who haven't read that 1988?
Well, that was the big take-home lesson. And the reason for that take-home lesson was that fat is high in calories. Saturated fat is a risk factor for coronary heart disease. That's where Ansel Keys comes in. And that's still true. That hasn't gone away. If you substitute saturated fat for polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat, your risk for heart disease goes up. So that hasn't changed. And but the idea was that the American public doesn't know the difference between saturated, unsaturated, and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And you can't say people eat less meat. Meat is the largest source. Meat and dairy products are the largest source of saturated fatty acids in American diets. You're not allowed to say eat less meat because of the politics. The meat industry doesn't like that. Cattle are grown in every state. Every state has 2 senators. The meat industry has enormous political power. So you couldn't say eat less meat. You could say eat less saturated fat, but nobody would understand it. So you said eat less fat. And then, of course, what happened as a result of that was that food companies started producing no-fat products with tons of carbohydrate and sugars. Nobody was talking about calories. And I like to talk about calories.
Why do you like calories?
Because that's what determines body weight.
But aren't there good calories and bad calories?
No, there are good foods and bad foods.
Oh, okay. There we go.
No, it depends on where you get your calories from. But body weight doesn't care where you get your calories from. Body weight is about calories. Health is about where those calories come from.
When I've studied the world's longest lived communities in blue zones, one of the values that keeps coming up is generosity. People who give, who feel connected, who show up for one another every day, tend to live longer, healthier lives. That's why I appreciate what Thrivent stands for. Thrivent is a financial services company that believes money is a tool, not a goal. And that idea really resonates with me. Because when money reflects your values, it can support a life of purpose, not just a bigger bank account. Thrivent offers advice, investments, insurance, banking, and also generosity programs because Thrivent believes deeply in generosity and in empowering people to be generous in their own communities. And I know that when generosity is woven into daily life, it builds stronger social bonds and leads to better health outcomes. Thrivent has over 120 years of expertise, and they've been a Fortune 500 company for over 30 years. Through their generosity programs, they have helped clients mobilize 17 million volunteer hours in 2025 alone. To me, that's values actually showing up and generosity in action. Learn more about this unique combination of financial services and generosity programs at Thrivent.com. I'm, in fact, about to head off to Sardinia, one of our blue zones, to not only study longevity, but to do some bicycling, and I'm really looking forward to it. But still, whenever I'm packing my bags for an extended trip like this, I'm reminded of how quiet my house is going to be while I'm away. And honestly, leaving an empty home feels like a missed opportunity. That's why listing my space on Airbnb while I'm out of town just makes sense. It's a very practical way to earn a little extra money. It fits seamlessly into my schedule because I only do it when I'm already traveling. It's not a full-time job. It's just a smart choice. If you have an upcoming trip, consider listing your space on Airbnb. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. I want to get to the foods we should be eating and what to eat now, which is your latest of many excellent books. So we have the government in the 1970s saying let's grow wheat and corn and soybeans and sugar beets, and let's incent that. Let's make sure lots of those are grown in a distribution system that makes it easy to get to market. Then we have corporations with this new ethos that maximize shareholder value, the health of our customers be damned. We need to make profit, or you lose your job. And what is the role of corporations, companies, in the way we're eating now, and the connection to all the sickness that comes from how we're eating?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of the food companies as being evil. They're just doing business the way business is required to be done in the United States. And shareholder value is the single most important function of a business. If a business isn't maximizing shareholder value, the
CEO gets fired.
The shareholders get annoyed and the CEO gets fired. And there are many, many examples of CEOs attempting to turn their corporation into a health food company. PepsiCo gave that a try. That didn't last long, that particular attempt. The shareholders were very, very cross.
I have a good friend who is the executive vice president for marketing for General Mills, had $1 billion a year budget. And he's a very moral guy. You know, we tend to think of these big evil corporations. But he was a pillar of the community. He had a moral compass, and he saw that General Mills Foods was making people sick, and he proactively created these lines of healthier alternatives, and they didn't sell as well.
Yeah, they
and
don't.
the CEO basically said to him, "Discontinue those lines."
Right.
And you want to say, well, that's a bad CEO. But if the CEO didn't discontinue those lines,
he loses his job.
He loses his job. And then Campbell's, you know, I remember I was talking to the food scientists of Progresso, which is a General Mills soup. And I said, well, you know, why don't you lower the sodium? Soup has lots of sodium in it as a rule, salt. And they said to me, well, we tried that, but
many times
Campbell's doesn't do it. And the consumer figures out that the sodium laden Campbell's soup tastes better and our sales take a hit.
That's why we need regulation. No, because then I mean, I've had people in food companies tell me this over and over again. Regulate us. Give us a level playing field.
Oh, interesting.
We don't want to go first. If we go first, we're going to lose sales. And, you know, and the way I describe this is food companies are not social service agencies. They're not public health agencies. They're businesses. And once you understand that they're businesses, then everything that they do makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, why should a tire company be able to maximize shareholder value, or a couch company be able, but the food company can't? It's not right.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
So, yes, of course they can. And, you know, I've had people in food companies say, we would love to reduce this or take this away, but we don't want to go first. And we know that if we take this out of our products, we'll lose sales. We're going through this right now with color additives. So
we have, you know, a government right now who seems, you know, at least lets us to believe they're aware of the perils of processed foods. Why isn't government regulating these foods that we know are making people sick? It doesn't take a huge connection for one side of the government who's realizes we're paying $5 trillion a year on healthcare to the other side of the government that says, wait, our food system is what making us sick. Why isn't that connection being made? And why aren't we getting the regulations to protect us?
Well, it's explicitly not being made. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, has stated explicitly that we're not going to regulate. We're going to ask for voluntary. And because we're not a nanny state.
And nobody's going first.
And nobody wants to go first. And so he's gotten some concessions from food companies about things like color additives, which I'm all for getting color additives out of the food supply, but I don't think it's nearly as important as reducing sodium. They're not saying anything about sodium. The new dietary guidelines, on the one hand, they say reduce sodium and they give a number that they want you to reduce the sodium to. But then on the other hand, they say add salt to season your food.
It doesn't make sense.
Which doesn't compute.
So why doesn't RFK want to regulate? Why doesn't he? I mean, I actually, I met him several times, and he's a smart individual. Say what you want about him, but he's intelligent. Why wouldn't he regulate? Why wouldn't he just?
Well, it's his particular view is that personal responsibility is what counts, and it's up to you to make healthier choices, and therefore the role of government is to educate. The role of government is not to regulate. The role of government is to educate. And so that's what they're trying to do, is to educate.
So how well does education work?
It doesn't. I mean, it works for some people, but it doesn't work. In general, and there's a major tenet of public health that education is not enough to change behavior. You need policy to back it up.
If you were put in charge of the food system and we made you the emperor, which I'd vote for, what kind of regulations would make the biggest difference in America to help us eat healthier?
I get money out of politics. Number one. Overturn Citizens United. Stop corporations from being able to give unlimited amounts of money to election campaigns so that we could actually elect people who were interested in public health, not personal gain or corporate health. I'd like to completely redo the agriculture system so that we focus on producing food for people, not fuel for automobiles or even feed for animals, because we need to eat less meat because of the effect of cattle on climate change. That's a big problem. I mean, I'm not for eating no meat. I'm for eating less meat. Let's reduce that. I'd like to see universal basic income so people have enough money to buy food and buy healthy food. I want universal school meals so the kids get fed in school with enough money to those schools so that they can make healthy meals for the kids. I can think of others.
To sum up, we had this in the 70s, this shift to creating mostly grains, and that then the food companies realized that they could take this new glut of grain and create feedlot meat, and it's the input for most of the junk food we eat, the chips and the cookies and the candies and
fast food.
And fast food. And these are high profit margin. They make a lot of money. A lot of money is spent marketing them to us, and we're susceptible to that marketing. Government doesn't want to regulate it because they're influenced by these big food companies who are making all this money. So the problem is really systematic. I mean, how do you react to this idea that it's your responsibility to eat healthy?
Well, the way I put it is that if you go into a grocery store and are trying to select healthy foods, you are fighting an entire food system on your own. That's a lot to ask of an individual. The food system is huge. It's $1 trillion or more in the United States.
How are you fighting it as a grocery store shopper?
Well, the grocery stores are set up to get you to buy some foods rather than others. I mean, they're totally, even if you're doing online shopping. If you're doing online shopping, what's on the homepage? That's not an accident. Every single inch of the grocery store real estate is being paid for by somebody or other. And the rules of grocery stores are the more products you see, the more you buy. The more often you see a product, the more likely you are to buy it. The more time you spend in the grocery store, the more products you are likely to buy. The further away the thing that you want is from the entrance, the more likely you are to pick up other things on the way.
But why does that make us make unhealthy selections?
Because those are the ones that are paid for. Food companies pay to have their products in the places where they are most likely to be seen, at eye level on the shelves, at the end of the aisles, that has a special name, end caps, and at the checkout counters.
And that's where we see the junk food.
And that's where you always see junk food, and they pay a lot of money to place products there. And so if you go into a grocery store and you see sugar-sweetened beverages absolutely everywhere, and it used to be that full sugar sodas were in 20 places in the store. They were here, they were there, they were in the other place, they were cold, they were room temperature, I mean, they were all over. Now it's bottled waters of one kind or another, sugar-sweetened, flavored, cannabis-flavored, alcohol-flavored, whatever, whatever.
And how about going out to eat?
Well, that also happened during that 1980 inflection point when there was, because food was cheap, because so much of it was produced, supply and demand. So much, 4,000 calories in the food supply, the price of food went down. It was cheap for restaurants to give people very large portions. And I'll say it again, larger portions have more calories. And
I like to joke we're on a seafood diet. We eat the food we see. And if it's a large
food. Right. And the more food that's put in front of you, and that's another rule, the more food that's put in front of you, the more calories you'll eat from it. We're human. And we don't like to waste food. So, we've all grown up. Finish what's on your plate. So restaurants started making foods in bigger and bigger portions. And because restaurant chefs are used to cooking in a certain way, they're going to up the sugar, up the sodium, up the fat, because it tastes better to them that way. And so you have no idea what you're eating. And the calories in restaurant portions are enormous. So between restaurant portions and larger portions in general, that is sufficient to account for the increase in caloric consumption that occurred between 1980 and 2000, and that's been quite well documented.
And that's from what to what?
Well, it was the average. It's hard to say. It was an increase of about 300 to 500 calories a day.
And today,
a lot of people ate more.
And today, is it even higher?
Hard to say because the Department of Agriculture isn't doing that kind of research anymore.
So does an extra 300 to 500 calories a day explain this jump in obesity? It does.
Easily.
Just
easily.
A little that's like a cookie.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a good size
cookie.
It's
a Starbucks cookie.
It's a good size cookie. And, that's...
work eating, I just want to understand.
I keep saying larger portions have more calories. I remember when larger portions came in the mid-'80s. I remember when muffins went from little teeny things that were 200 calories and are now called mini muffins to what they are now, which is 600 or 800 calories. And when bagels went from 200 calories to 600 or 800 calories. I remember when that happened. The attack of the giant muffins.
Yeah, or Super Size Me.
Or Super Size Me,
that documentary where
right.
Morgan Spurlock ate at McDonald's for a month and got very sick.
My first movie.
Oh, you're a bit of a celebrity.
I had my 30 seconds of fame in that movie. But yeah, and so
Well,
that's
for the record, I gave you about 3 minutes of fame in Live to 100, our Netflix documentary, where you were
right.
kind of
Right. That was very nice of you.
It was nice of you,
So
actually.
so that's what happened, and people just got used to eating more. They got used to eating more in restaurants. They got used to eating more in packaged foods, and larger portions have more calories. People put on weight.
I think it will surprise a lot of people to learn that the current farm bill is somewhat at fault here. That the farm bill we have could be changed to impact how we eat.
Oh, it could change enormously. It could because well, first of all, the farm bill.
Yeah,
the-
explain what it is and how it fuels us eating wrong.
Yeah, it's the omnibus farm bill, and it's an enormous bill, usually 700 or 800 pages of very tiny type, and it governs farm programs, but it also governs the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which used to be food stamps. And 80% of the Farm Bill funding is food stamps, which is a whole issue in itself. But the 20% that's left, which is about $20 billion a year, goes to farm subsidies. And those subsidies are insurance payments, various other payments to commodity producers. There's very, very, very little money in food for people or what they call specialty crops. Actually, it's in the horticulture title. It's called horticulture.
So the root of the problem, one might argue, is that American farmers find it very difficult to make money growing food. They make money growing commodity, and they almost don't have a choice, do they?
Not if they want to make a living. So, I mean, the system is skewed so that only the largest of the industrial farming, I mean, the word farmer doesn't really apply here. It's the industrial producers are the only ones who really make any money, and they get the subsidies. The more food they grow, the more subsidies they get. The system is rigged against small farmers,
Growing like organic vegetables,
or
carrots
medium-sized farmers, and it's rigged against them in two ways. They're not subsidized, and they don't have a really good competitive system for who to sell their products to, or a distribution system that works. And this has been going on for a very long time. You would think it would be a fixable problem. But the agriculture industry is extremely powerful because it's situated in that central Midwest from top to bottom. And that's where the political power is.
Iowa, etc.
That's Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, all of those states. And Iowa is interesting because Iowa used to be the vegetable capital of the United States.
Now it's the pork.
And now it's corn and soybeans and pork.
I have a good friend who has an enormous farm in some of the most fertile soil in American Illinois, and he grows these commodity crops. And I said, why don't you grow kale and organic carrots and beets and these things that are good for us? And he says, Dan, I could grow that, but I can't get it to market.
Right.
And if you're growing corn and soybeans, very easy. There's a grain elevator in every small town, and there's a regular sort of shipping supply chain to get it to buy, and there's somebody to buy it.
Right. So it's a structural and systematic problem, easily solved by putting some money into it.
What's the easy solve? Where would you put that money?
You set up a distribution system. Why not? We know how to do things like that. We can get vegetables. We can get vegetables from California.
True. But is there any low-hanging fruit in the farm bill? Like, I like to think about not only what's effective, but what's feasible. People out listening, they feel helpless. But is there anything they could sort of advocate for in the farm bill that might actually be passable in the next round?
Yeah, they could get subsidies for specialty crops. There are some, we're talking about millions, not billions. And so it's very small scale.
That seems like an easy fix.
It's not an easy fix because the large industrial agricultural producers are very politically powerful.
So they would want to squash a subsidy for
They want their own
especially
subsidies.
Okay, and they're stronger at getting
Yeah,
those subsidies.
sure. I mean, they know how to work the political system. They hire lobbyists. They have the Department of Agriculture supports groups within these commodities that do education and marketing, and some of them lobby. And they're really good at what they do. They want to keep the system exactly as it is, and they're very good at that.
When we started the Dan Buettner podcast, there were a lot of details to figure out. Even as an experienced production company, moving into the podcast space was a big challenge, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. We were learning how to navigate podcast distribution and, more importantly, how to make sure Dan's message really stood out in such a crowded health and longevity space. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names to brands just getting started. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's unique style and helps you stand out. You can tackle all those important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. Everything is in one place, making your life easier and your business operations smoother. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/livebetter. Go to shopify.com/livebetter. That's shopify.com/livebetter.
So now let's move over to corporations, and they get a pass because they're in the gladiator ring of the free market system. They have to maximize shareholder value. But let's talk about plain fare. And you read these studies that often conveniently find that this product is good for me, and who knew? And how is the system rigged when it comes to scientific studies and the food industry?
Well, here we have the Department of Agriculture again, which works with food producers to do research to demonstrate the benefits of their products. And I would say every fruit and vegetable, every product, everybody is doing research. And the way they do it is they send out a request for proposals, and they say, we're looking for research proposals that will demonstrate the benefits of our product for preventing this disease, this problem, or whatever. They're not going to fund proposals that aren't likely to show those benefits. For example, the pomegranate people they put, I think, more than $30 million in research on the benefits of pomegranates. And I remember one incredibly complicated rat study in which they gave rats concentrated pomegranate juice, and the study demonstrated that the antioxidants that are found in pomegranates showed up in the rats afterwards. Well, I could have told them that. If you feed a rat antioxidants, they're going to have antioxidants. But they were arguing, if you eat these things, you're going to have all these antioxidants and you're going to be healthier, which is not what the study showed.
But what are some of the studies that come out that people have read and believe where you just roll your eyes and say,
well,
this is not?
Anything that demonstrates some phenomenal health benefit of any one food. It doesn't matter what the one food is. One food is not going to make any difference in your diet to your overall health. What matters with overall health is diets.
So what are some of the more egregious examples that have popped up on
Well,
your
the
radar?
most egregious, certainly Coca-Cola where Coca-Cola funded, this was a huge scandal 15 years ago, where Coca-Cola was shown to have been secretly funding studies that demonstrated that physical activity was more important than what you eat in obesity.
And it's not?
Unfortunately, no. I'm sorry. Physical activity is very important for overall health. But if you want to lose weight, you got to work awfully hard at it.
You can't work off a bad diet.
It's really hard to work off a bad diet because if you walk a mile, it's only 100 calories. That's 2 Oreo cookies.
So our current food pyramid puts in the upper left where you would actually start reading. If you start reading a book, you would start in the upper left-hand side of the page and start reading. In the upper left, steak. And you look at the scientific advisors to the food pyramid, and the majority of them have been or were funded by the meat industry.
What a coincidence.
I guess we can say no more on that and let the listener or viewer draw conclusions.
Yeah, what a coincidence. I mean, that process of the new dietary guidelines was so disappointing because the promise was that this would be gold standard science and that it would be free of conflicts of interest. And it was neither, because the way they did it was they just had one person write a personal review of the literature. There were people who were asked to do those literature reviews who say that they were told that there were studies they were not allowed to look at and said, okay, I'm not doing this. But there were other people who did do them. I don't know what those arrangements were, but they were very personal reviews of reviews. They were certainly not systematic literature reviews in the usual way these things are done. And they wrote their personal view of what they thought this research showed. And then somebody else took those reviews and turned them into dietary guidelines. But we don't really know how that process occurred because it was not transparent.
You've been studying food and nutrition for 50 years. When you look at the dietary guidelines, the what America is supposed to cue off of to decide what to eat, what are the issues you take with the current ones, besides meat being on the top of the
dietary guidelines have always said balance calories, don't eat too much salt, sugar, saturated fat, alcohol, eat more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. They've always said that. Oh, and the way you could summarize that is Michael Pollan's eat food, not too much, mostly plants. These guidelines are eat food as much as you want, mostly meat, is the way they come out.
And what does that lead to health-wise?
Well, you worry that high meat diets are associated with cancer risk. High sodium diets are associated with hypertension and heart disease. High sugar diets are associated with all kinds of problems, metabolic problems. Too many calories leads to obesity. Too much alcohol leads to all kinds of bad things. And I don't think they say that very clearly. The eat real food message is fine. And you restrict your intake of highly processed foods. They don't use the word ultra processed, but they use highly processed. First time the dietary guidelines have ever done that. Those were good. But then double the amount of protein you eat? I don't think so. There's no evidence that that's necessary. And protein for many people is a euphemism for meat. They're really telling people to eat more red meat. They don't say to restrict red meat and processed meat, where there's evidence that those are diets high, and those are linked to cancer. And they are urging full fat and saturated fat when the evidence on saturated fat has not changed. So the system is rigged against healthful choices.
I push back a little bit against that only because, and I'm not funded by the big bean industrial complex, but I go to blue zones, and those people in Icaria and highlands of Sardinia and Nicoya Peninsula, they're well below the U.S. poverty line. and they're eating peasant foods. They're eating largely beans, whole grains, corn and rice.
Dan, they're cooking.
They are cooking.
They're cooking. Americans don't cook.
Yeah, I did an experiment. I live in Miami, and I did an experiment with 20 inner city moms. And we made an agreement. If you come 10 times to this cooking class, I will give you a free Instapot. I have nothing to do with Instapot, but I like it. Instapot is an electric sort of pressure cooker. $50, you push one button. For 10 weeks in a row, we voted on what recipe was all very simple peasant ingredients, whole, plant-based, no processed. We chopped it together. We put the beans and the grains in there, put the lid, hit on the button. We had a little conversation between us, and then we ate it together. And then leftovers they got to bring home. And because they had the pressure cooker at home now, they had the hardware, they had the software, the recipe. They could afford the ingredients. We made sure there was all less than
and they had the skill.
The skill. And you know what I think the most important thing is? The most important longevity ingredient is taste. I could tell you all day long that fermented tofu is good for you or broccoli, but if you don't like fermented tofu, broccoli, you ain't going to eat it. But if they like it and they've had that experience of tasting a Sardinian minestrone or a Hoppin' John is beans and rice my theory is we're going to taste it. That was 6 months ago. About 2/3 of them are still cooking with that crock pot, Instapot. So I often think we look at this gargantuan problem and we say, I can't change the Farm Bill. But I think we can shift our focus to doing something that.
Well, yeah, that's why I think school gardens are so important. Because the kids learn how to plant food, they learn what food is, they harvest it, they make it into whatever they're doing. Their relationship with food is totally transformed. Those are the kinds of things where you can have an enormous effect on people's relationship with food, with teaching people how to cook, teaching people how to garden, making sure they have the equipment at what is really not very high cost. But how do you do that? I mean, how do you mandate that in order to bring it up to scale?
I think you don't start by mandating, but you have influence. You're in the New York Times all the time. You have a very powerful microphone, and not only
I push for school food all the time.
Yes,
I think it's really important.
I think it's having the half a dozen things that you can do, and I would argue having an Instapot or a one pot solution and knowing the ingredients that an inner city mom can afford and how to assemble them to taste delicious. That is a solution that I think we could be putting more sort of attention to.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
And more investment where we can. You've been at this for half a century. Are you optimistic? Or pessimistic?
I see, what I've seen over that period is many, many, many more people being interested in these kinds of issues, particularly among young people who really care about food and health and are very concerned. I mean, to give just one example, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, if I was talking about the role of the food industry and shareholder value, I would never mention the word capitalism in a classroom because it was too intimidating and it would turn people off. Now I can't talk about these issues without somebody in the audience saying, "Aren't you talking about capitalism?" Yes, I am. Late stage at that. And so the question is how within the system that we've inherited or that we've created, I hate to take responsibility for creation of this system when I've been fighting it for so long, obviously not effectively enough, so that you have to work within whatever system you have. And, I urge anybody who's interested in this to become an activist or an advocate, a food advocate, and try to use the political system to change the food system for the better.
How do we do that? I'm a housewife in Iowa.
Oh.
What can I do?
Well, I'd start with the local school. I just think school food is so important for the kids who are in it. You have a school that's producing decent food, and you've got kids who are eating healthfully, who have a completely different relationship with food than kids who haven't had that experience. And it's possible to change the food in one school. It really is, if you've got the right people there.
But aren't schools, don't they have to, they take the USDA funding and then they have to buy these USDA sanctioned food?
Oh, but it's what they do with those foods that makes the difference. Some schools cook from scratch.
Most of them warm.
Yeah, some warm, but some cook from scratch. And those schools are doing fabulous work.
Wow. How can we find out about a school who's doing it right? Did any come off the top?
There are groups that are working with, you find whatever group there is that's working with your local school district. I'm actually going to visit a school tomorrow with wellness in the schools.
This is a big idea.
And I'm going to go to a school that Wellness in the Schools is associated with.
Tell us what Wellness in the Schools is.
It's a group that puts chefs into schools. There are two issues in school food. One is how the food tastes, and the other is whether the kids are eating it or not.
Yeah.
And they're taking me to a school where they're paying attention to both of those issues.
Well, would you share that with me and I'll share it with the audience here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, because I think we need models to emulate.
Well, also Chef Ann, the Chef Ann Foundation, works with schools to train the school food service people. And I met recently with a group of them in Tompkins County, upstate New York.
Chef A-N-N?
A-N-N.
Chef
Ann Cooper. And so she has this program where they train the people in the school to produce food from scratch, to worry about making sure that the foods are whole and healthy, and to make sure that the kids are eating it.
So it can be done, and I'm all for the optimism it can be done. And I think we need to shine a very bright light on those schools that have figured it out, because I have a new book coming out called Blue Zone Evolution, where I found the areas in the world where people live the longest lives in full health, which is to say without chronic disease and without diabetes. And the delta is about 12 years over Americans. Our healthy life expectancy about 64. I found places where they were living to 76 or 77. And it was never a coincidence. And the most convincing takeaway I got, I met with sort of the RFK of Japan. We have obesity rate of over 40%. Japan, this I can't tell you what it is, where it is exactly, but it's in Japan. Their obesity rate is 4%. 1/10 the rate and I said, how do you do that? And she was kind of very diplomatic. And I'm sure she didn't want to badmouth the U.S. government. And she thought a minute. And she said, well, at a very early age, we teach our children about nutrition and we feed them that nutritious food. So I said, let's go into a Japanese school kitchen. I actually went to one. I got invited in. I watched them. Here were these 5-year-old kids who were helping prepare the food. Their meal was a protein, but it was often tofu, plant-based protein, but there was a little bit of meat or fish or tofu. There was always a vegetable. There was a pickle. And there was rice. And then they had this sort of barley tea. But there were no fried chicken nuggets. There was no brownie. There was no chocolate milk. So their palates were being trained at age 5 to favor these more subtle flavors.
And textures.
Textures, yes.
And lots of different kinds of foods.
And they had to pick up and I look at our school lunches and they're an aberration. The foods that we call healthy are anything but. And
well, some schools do it much better than others.
Yes, so let's focus on those. All right, so this has been fantastic. I feel like we've gotten a better understanding of where we are now and what the origins of it. And I think most people don't understand why we are where we are today with
Follow the money.
all the. If we're a Marion Nestle reader, just getting familiar with you, what's the first of the many books that you've written we should read?
Well, it depends. I think What to Eat Now is the book that I wrote for the general public. If you're nerdy and want to get into the weeds, start with Food Politics. But get it from the library because I'm about to start working on a 25th anniversary edition. It'll come out in 2027.
And you're writing now a book about cereal.
Yes, that one's coming out in September. And it's a book about food and nutrition policy and food marketing told through cereal boxes.
Yeah, and you have a rather odd fetish with cereal boxes, don't you?
Well, I've been collecting them for a long time, but I've collected cereal boxes with ridiculous health claims. That's my favorite.
What is the most egregious health claim you've seen on a cereal box?
Oh, the one about if you eat this sugar-sweetened cereal, your kid will be smarter.
Which one is that?
Oh, which one was it? It was a General Mills cereal. I can't remember which one. It was some sugar-sweetened cereal.
Your kid will be smarter. I love
Yeah.
it. And how about your newsletter? How can we?
Oh, that's foodpolitics.com, where I post something about food politics once a day, 5 days a week, not on weekends. I've been doing it for a very long time.
You're very humble. You're a bit of a hard ass, I will tell you that, but in a
Gosh.
lovable way. But
I'm not sure I'm flattered by that.
but you are a consummate academic who has this rare ability to connect with the everyday person. You're a great writer, and you can take this science and you boil it down to be not only simple, but compelling. And that is not only a great gift that you possess, but it's a great gift for us living in this toxic environment that's killing so many Americans. So on behalf of all of the listeners, thank you. And thank you on behalf of our children as well. So keep it up for another 50
thank
years.
you, Dan. That's really nice of you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Marion Nestle.